Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to the program, The View from Middle East. I'm your host, Faisal Hassan. Assalamu alaikum. This is a new show that we are bringing for you, and the only agenda of this show is that we will give you your weekly dose of information from Middle East, information that matters to you. So, in the name of Allah, inshallah, we are starting this program. This is our first episode. We will try our best to give you only that information, only those news that matters to you, that you should know as a Muslim, as a concerned person, as a human being, that what's going on in Middle East. We will try to bring you a fair and balanced analysis of each news also, and will only provide you with the facts. There will be absolutely no unconfirmed or fictional news at all. So we will start our first topic today. So the format is that I'll give you the news, and then we will do some analysis also, and maybe in the next few episodes we will have some kind of an interactive session with some of our guests too. We will invite guests from that part of the world, and we'll discuss some issues with them too. First, news. Actually, it's a set of news. The country that I want to discuss is Israel. And the heading I have written here about Israel is that Israel's obsession with Iran. And literally, if you read the top 3 newspapers of Israel, if you read, I have the names written in front of me. If you read Jerusalem Post, if you read Haaretz, if you read the Times of Israel, these are 3 leading newspapers of Israel, and you do not need to go even to the second page. If you just see the first page of each newspaper, almost 60 to 70% of news are about Iran. And now that is very interesting. I mean, I'm a Pakistani, and the first time I saw the Israeli newspapers, and I started reading them a couple of years ago, first thing that basically shocked me, you can say, is that this is an Israeli newspaper. Instead of having their own local issues, political issues, regional issues, their only news, most of their news is about Iran. And I'll give you the examples too. I have written down all the examples. I will give you all the news about Iran that happened last week. Last week in Israel, what they're leading, the top 3 newspapers were talking about Iran. That's the second question. The second question is what they were talking about. The first question is that how come they're only talking about Iran? Don't they have any other issues? So that's why I use the word obsession. That when you see Israeli newspapers, you'll be shocked. You will think that they're obsessed with Iran. Now the question is why they're obsessed with Iran. And the answer to that is because they have figured out that if there is any real player in the global stage that can counter them and that can counter their evil plans, it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's that system of government, the only system of government that is directly challenging Israel, only player. I mean, they may have support in the form of Hezbollah or other organizations, but the main player, the leading player in the international stage against Israel is Iran. Now, everyone talks about Israel. I mean, all these Muslim countries, Israel is this and that, and, Palestine, and even in Pakistan, we see every single leader that we are with Palestine, and we are against Israel, and no more passports for Israel, and all that good stuff. You hear about Israel from 50 Muslim countries, but when you see Israeli newspapers, they are only talking about one Muslim country. So this is something to think about, right? So this is why. Why? Because Israelis have figured out, Israelis know their enemy better than anyone. They have figured out that out of these 50 Muslim countries who are talking against us 49 of them are just doing what they call the lip service. And if there is any country that will take like a real action, or that will become a real hurdle in all our evil plans, and I'll talk about their evil plans too, that will really resist us, that's the country is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, the news that happened in Israel, and how they in the last 1 week, what happened in Israel that had we'll talk about the obsession of Israel with Iran. First thing they did, and believe you me, this is the age of pandemic. We'll all, I don't even need to mention it. Everyone knows Corona. Everyone knows this COVID-19 stuff. We've been dealing with it for the last 6 months now. Every country is. So is Israel. And they even had a spike in cases last week. They had almost 1,000 cases per day in Israel throughout the week. And that's a big number for Israel. That may not be a big number for US, but for Israel it's a very big number. But still, throughout the week, their newspapers were completely covering Iran. First, one of the top headings of their newspaper is that Israelis sent a satellite in the orbit, and they named it Ofak. I guess Ofak is an Arabic term, and it means horizon. But at the same time, I'm thinking it's also a Hebrew term too, because it's spelled out as O-F-E-K, Ofak. And their defense minister, their concerned ministers, their space program directors, they clearly, explicitly said that we are sending this satellite in the orbit only for Iran, only to monitor Iran. And that satellite is supposed to be, it'll go into the orbit about 600 kilometers into the orbit, and it'll send them like high-def pictures, satellite pictures of, Iranian installations and Iranian-sensitive places. That's their stated goal. The team that worked on that satellite, plus the government of Israel, their stated goal is that we are spending billions of dollars, and I think it took them about 5 to 10 years to work on the satellite. I don't have the exact timeline, but it took almost 5 years that they worked on this program. They worked on this project, and the sole purpose of this project was to spending billions of dollars only to monitor Iran from space. That was the first. That was the main heading of all Israeli newspapers in the last 7 days. Then there's another burning issue, and the burning issue is actually this burning issue, and I'm sure maybe most of you will know. I'm saying maybe, I'm not too sure, maybe most of you will know. It's the issue of annexation of West Bank. And this is not an issue that started last week. This is an issue that has been going on for 3 weeks now. And if you don't know, I'll give you a high-level overview about this. That this clown called Trump, he earlier this year he announced this deal of century, and supposedly it was supposed to be the best deal ever, and it was rejected even before it came out. It was rejected by Palestinians. It was rejected by most of the world, even European countries. Some traitor Arab countries, they did not flat out rejected it, but behind the scenes they had basically embraced the deal, and they wanted it to go through. According to that deal of the century, Israel is supposed to annex. Annex means grab, basically snatch. Whenever you see the word annexation, and if it's coming in Israeli context, the proper translation is snatching. So this annexation of West Bank and this this Jordan Valley, this is the area between Jordan and Israel. It's on the side of the Jordan River. That's why it's called Jordan Valley, and that's why West Bank is called West Bank, because the bank of river, that side of the Jordan side of the river, is west. So that's why that's called West Bank. So according to this deal of the century that this Trump introduced, Israel is supposed to annex about 30% of this West Bank area. And that deal was supposed to, they were supposed to practically start annexing it on the 1st of July, starting this month. But they haven't yet. The Israelis, their given date that we will start annexing parts of West Bank according to the deal of century that Trump gave earlier this year was 1st of July, but they haven't done it yet. And the reason is that they are basically weighing it out. They are seeing the opportunity cost. And I read all their articles in detail about annexation. The people who are against annexation, there are certain people in Israel that are against annexation. And it's not because they are saying it's wrong to take away someone's country. No. They are saying because it's strategically wrong at this point. Like, we will take West Bank from Palestinians, but they are saying don't take it right now. And then they are giving other strategic angles too, and I'll tell you those angles. What Israelis are stuck with, they're confused now, and this is their confusion. They are saying that the area that we are supposed to annex, the 30% area of West Bank, that we are supposed to annex under the deal of century, we are controlling it anyways. Israeli military is completely, no Palestinian. There are areas in West Bank that there are one, in the whole neighborhood, there is only one Palestinian home. And that Palestinian, just to go from his house to the market, and from the market to his home, he has to go through about a dozen checkpoints, just only to go to the market from his house. This is how the West Bank is being controlled by the Israelis. So what they're saying is that we have it annexed anyways. We are practically controlling West Bank anyways. These areas, these big areas that they want to annex, they want to snatch. One's name is Judea, Judea, and the other one's name is Samaria. I may have the second one pronunciation wrong, but these are the two big blocks that they say has a large Jewish population, and they want to annex these chunks. What Israelis are saying is that we are practically controlling these areas anyway, so why formalize it? Why do you need to put a stamp on it that these areas are ours, and what will happen if we put a stamp on it, according to this deal of the century? Now you will have all these European countries who were supposedly your allies, they will become against you. They will say, why have you done this? Why have you, this is a conflict zone to begin with. The whole problem is about land, and now you are taking more land. So they will have a big problem with the Europeans, with the EU. Then Israelis will have a problem with the UN, United Nations. And the largest problem, and this is not actually a problem, this is a very, you can say, a cunning strategy. The largest hurdle in the way of Israeli annexation is this. It's a psychological hurdle. Arab countries are telling Israel that, hey, Iranians have already won over the hearts of Palestinians. They are supporting Hamas. They are supporting Islamic Jihad. They are supporting all the resistance movement. And Palestinians, even though they are all Sunnis, but their affiliation, they are more leaning towards Iran because they see that Iran is the only country that is helping them. Arabs are telling Israel that if you annex these areas, it'll be very hard for us to win back Palestinians, from whatever sympathy or from whatever attachment they have left with us. Palestinians are almost detached from the Arab world because they have seen the real faces. So Arabs are saying that whatever face saving we are left with Palestinians, it will go away if you annex this area. So they are telling Israelis that you'll have to pay a heavy price for it. Because if Palestinians are leaning, let's say 70% towards Iranians and 30% towards us, if you annex this land, all Palestine will go into Iran's lap. All their sympathies and all their attachment and all their attention will go towards Iran, because they will say that, hey, what did these Arab countries do? Israel annexed 30% of our area again. So Israelis haven't officially annexed this area, officially snatched this area, because they are saying that we have the control anyways. It's just like, I'll give you, for example, that if you have a disputed property and someone is living there, someone is living in a house and it's disputed, and all of a sudden one of the family members, he says that I'm going to the court and I will fight this case out and I will try to make it official that this is our house. But the family knows that this is not their house. So what will the elders say to him? They will say that, why do you need to ignite this issue when we have been living here for about 100 years anyways? The whole purpose of this house is that we live here, or we use this. We are using it anyways. Why do you need to ignite this issue in the court? Same thing happening with Israel right now, that we are controlling this area anyways. Why do you need to put a stamp of annexation on it and make the rest of the world enemy? Arabs are saying that whatever face saving we have left will be gone. Literally, Arabs are telling them, the Israelis, the same thing, that you are controlling this area anyways. Why do you need to, officially announce it that this is ours? That was a second burning issue. The third leading issue in all Israeli newspapers, and this is again not this week, this has been stretching for about 3 weeks now, is the arms embargo of Iran. Now, if you don't know this issue, when this nuclear deal, JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, this happened between the world powers, the five world powers, US, Britain, France, China, Russia, and I think it was Germany. Yes, maybe Germany was one of it instead of France. But anyways, the five superpowers, the five world powers, plus Iran. One of the clauses of that deal was that Iran will not be able to buy conventional weapons, like regular weapons, like an assault rifle, like civilian weapons. Iran will not be able to buy civilian weapons or conventional weapons from the international market until the October of 2020. So which means that in October 2020, according to that JCPOA deal, that embargo, that restriction on Iran to buy conventional weapons will be lifted and Iran will be free to buy weapons. Now Israel is working, they're having sleepless nights. They cannot sleep. Their country is getting eaten by corona, but they're concerned about this embargo. And they want to reverse this embargo. And they have no reason. They have no logic. Their ambassador to United Nations, Denny Danon, is literally, every day he's walking like miles into the United Nations. He's knocking on every ambassador's door that, please, we beg you, don't lift this embargo, don't lift this embargo. And this is what the world's reply to them is? That first of all, who are you to tell us? Like, you are not even part of this deal. They say US. Well, again, I think this ayat fits here, that Wallahu khairul makirin, that Allah is the biggest strategist here, that now the United Nations is saying that US is no more a party of JCPOA anymore because you walked away in 2018. You walked away. You said we're not a part of this deal anymore. So you have no say in this deal anymore. And this embargo has everything to do with this deal. So who are you to tell us now that extend this embargo or don't lift this embargo? So America's walking away from this deal in 2018 is now backfiring on them about this arms embargo. Now Israelis and Americans are basically they say licking their wounds, that why did we do this? And they are moving heaven and earth to have this arms embargo extended on Iran. Now, I'll tell you something personal. When I read about this, that the arms embargo of Iran is being lifted in October, later this year, in October 2020, I was so surprised, I was so shocked that there is not one area in this world where Iran is not under restriction. I swear, I kept thinking that Iran has restrictions on, let's say, space technology or nuclear technology or missile technology. I never knew that Iran cannot even buy a bullet from China or Russia. Iran, this is how Iran is surrounded by the wolves. That not even an inch of breathing space the world is giving to Iran, and Iran is, alhamdulillah, standing strong. Iran could not buy even a bullet from another country. That's a conventional weapon. So when I read about this embargo, my first reaction was surprise. I was like, Iran couldn't even buy a bullet? I did not even know that. I thought they were only restricted to the other technologies like nuclear and atomic and whatnot. So these were the three burning issues from Israel last week. The first one was that they sent a satellite. They announced that it's only for Iran. We will monitor Iran from 600 kilometers into the space. Second is the annexation of West Bank, and what's stopping Israel from doing it. Even though they had announced 1st of July, they haven't officially announced any annexation. Third is the arms embargo of Iran. The arms embargo of Iran is in October. That's like July, August, September. It's 3 months from now. But Israelis cannot sleep because they know that, they just don't want Iran to even have a piece of bread, because they know that any form of energy that goes to Iran, it'll be used to counter against them. That's what Israelis know. Now let's come to our dear and loved Arab world. My first heading was Israel's obsession with Iran. Second heading is Arabs' obsession with Israel. We're not going to say Arabs' obsession with Iran, because if you read Arab papers last week, and I'll give you the references, if you read Al Jazeera, if you read Al Arabiya, these are their leading newspapers, and I'm talking about their newspapers. If you read their newspaper, just like I said, if you read Israel's newspaper, you will see that the country is obsessed with Iran. If you read Arab newspaper, you will see the whole Arab world is obsessed with Israel in a positive way. First burning issue, that UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, these three countries are officially working now with Israel under the pretext, under the heading that we are doing research on corona. Scientists from these Arab countries, they are traveling to Israel. Israeli scientists are traveling to Dubai on a regular basis. They are forming research centers. They are working on research projects, and these are the projects that they have announced clearly, according to their own papers. They are completely flattening the ground that, any day they are just, you can say, aching that they want these welcome parties in Israel now. They want their embassies open with tapes and flowers and confettis and fireworks. You can just tell that Arabs are aching to do that. Biggest thorn in their way is this Palestinian issue. And if Iran wasn't supporting this Palestinian issue, they would have taken Arabs with the Israelis. They would have taken Palestinian issue out of everything. In Urdu they say like a hair out of butter. That easily. Just like if there is a hair in butter, you can just take it out easily. Arabs, with collaboration with Israel, they would have taken the Palestinian, they would have completely wiped off Palestine with the help of Israel if there was no resistance from Palestine in the form of Hamas, and if there was no support from Iran to Hamas. They're working hand in hand. Israeli scientists, they shake hands, they hug each other with Arab scientists, Arab researchers. And one first thing that happened last week, this had been going on for a while, like what I'm telling you right now, that Israeli and Arab scientists or researchers are working together, and they're saying we're working because of corona. Okay, well said. I mean, we believe you. This has been going on for a few months now. What happened last week, that was the first time, was that a Saudi writer wrote for an Israeli newspaper. This is the first time that has happened this week. First time in the history that a Saudi analyst or news person, he wrote an article for an Israeli newspaper, and it was published too in the Israeli newspapers. So they are now, they are the relationship between Arab and Israel. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like, one of those things that everyone knows that they have a relationship, but still no one talks about it. Or both of these parties, it's almost like, the nikah has happened, but the marriage ceremony has yet to take place. It's official, but it's still not official. It's one of those things. You see Arab Twitter, they are in love with Israel. Leading Arab Twitter accounts. And you know how they're deceiving Muslims, and you know how these Arab writers are deceiving Muslims? By using deceptive lines, by using deceptive sentences. Who are we to talk about Israel? Islam is the religion of peace. Islam is the religion of humanity. Aren't Israelis humans? And my first question to them is, aren't Palestinian humans? Aren't you concerned about that humanity first? What about their peace? Who took their peace for the last 70 years? That monster called Israel, who has taken away all peace and humanity from Palestine, you are concerned about their peace and humanity, and then you bring Islam. So they deceive people. Deception. Which means when you give someone false information, but you always use it in a fancy way, where no one can call you out directly. Like, for example, if an Arab writer writes that, hey, Israel is good, most of the Muslims will like shun him. Most of the Muslims will not listen to him because he's like, how come you're saying Israel is right? But if they say the same thing with a twist, Israelis are also humans. I mean, they are. We're not arguing about that. But are you talking about humanity and peace for Israelis when their act of the last 70 years in front of everyone? This is the kind of traitorship. This is the kind of deception these Arab writers are, showing towards the Palestinian cause. So that's the first thing. I mean, if you want to take away any piece of information from this program, it's that the relationship between Arabs and Israel is becoming so normal that Arab writers are actually directly writing for Israeli newspapers. And maybe in the next program I'll give you the references too. I forgot to write that name of the Israeli paper. Last, because this is our first program, we wanted to get your feedback. We wanted to see how the response is. And then based on the response and feedback from you, we will evolve this program and we'll add more things to it. We'll add more topics to it. So this is the you can say the beta version right now. The last issue is the crisis in Lebanon. And I'll skim through it. I'll make it very quick. The biggest crisis in Lebanon is the financial crisis. And this is the biggest tool right now that the enemy is using against resistance in Lebanon, against Hezbollah. What's the cause? I'll give you a very quick overview. What's happening in Lebanon and what's the cause. What's happening in Lebanon is that last week in one day, their Lebanese pound, the Lebanese dollar, I think they use it dollar, it dropped like 70% of its value in one day. Which means that if you had one Lebanese dollar, within 1 hour, it was reduced to 30 cents. So, for example, if you could buy with $1 a bottle of water, you couldn't do it anymore. You would require $3. This is what happened in Lebanon in one day. I think this happened in the middle of the week on Tuesday or Wednesday. So what caused it? There are only two words. One is their own, Lebanon's own corrupt elite that has been milking Lebanon, their financial institutions, for the last 20 years now. And the second is United States. Americans helped them. So now Hezbollah has a new battle. Hezbollah is working on so many fronts that it's a miracle that they're still working. I mean, you'll be a fool if you think that they're working on their own. They're working with God's help. So Hezbollah, on one side it's Golan Heights, on the other side it's Israel, the Syrian front, the Iraqi front, Daesh, ISIS, you name it. Mossad, Israeli intelligence. Now they have a new battlefront in their home. And that is to lift the Lebanon economy. Because U.S. has started meddling. U.S. has started interfering in Lebanon at a higher level, at a new level now. U.S. is interfering in Lebanon because U.S. is thinking that this may be the right time to basically have Lebanon collapse. And if the country collapses, obviously Hezbollah will collapse, according to U.S. So they are saying that, give it that last push, the last nail in the coffin of Lebanon, God forbid. Lebanon will, inshallah, survive. Lebanon will come through. Lebanon will come through with the help of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is part of that country. You cannot. I mean, if anyone from the other side is listening to this program, make no mistake. Hezbollah will stay in Lebanon until eternity. As long as Lebanon exists, Hezbollah will exist. So Hezbollah has a new battlefront. We are hoping that Lebanon will come out of this crisis. We'll discuss a bit more about it in our next program. But for now, you just need to know that one of the biggest issues in Lebanon is economy. Their economy completely crashed. And that's because of their corrupt banking practices, corrupt politicians. And they were literally milking the country. And it came to a point where their economy just collapsed because it was completely artificial economy. It's a complete subject, artificial economy, which means they were showing that we have these assets, but they were not. Banks were charging high rates, and banks were showing their worth that they did not have, and eventually it collapsed. So there's a huge line of people. They want to change their currency to US dollars, and hopefully China is playing its role to basically take US dollar or US dollars role in international market, and they want to introduce their own currency, digital currency. China is working on it. I'm sure you may have seen it in the news. But right now, Lebanon is under tremendous pressure, tremendous financial pressure, and the enemy's first goal is to divert this crisis towards Hezbollah. That, hey, because Lebanon, because Hezbollah. And I mean, it makes me laugh when I see these this news that, hey, Lebanon's corrupt bank was scamming people, and people come out on streets and they say ban Hezbollah. But you just said that Lebanon's bank was, their federal bank, their state bank, was scamming people. But on the streets, you say ban Hezbollah. How are these two things related? Oh, no, because Hezbollah is in Syria, because Hezbollah is doing this, Hezbollah is doing that. Okay, so that's why the bank scammed people, because Hezbollah was helping Syrians? I mean, come on. Even if you're a blind person, you can see that there's another player who is giving them these scripts. You know, so this is what's happening in a nutshell. We hope that you benefit from these news. If you start viewing this program on a regular basis, we assure you that we will give you the information that matters the most to you, that's most relevant to you. And that Middle East is that part of the world where, as a Muslim, it's our duty to stay informed and aware. So we will do our part, we will play our part, and we ask Allah that Allah helps us in our goals and dreams to bring you the right information. And inshallah, we'll see you next week. Until then, Allah Hafiz.